We are following that breaking news out of South Carolina. The state Supreme Court has overturned the 2023 convictions of Alec Murdaugh for the murders of his wife and son and ordered a new trial. The court says Murdaugh was denied his right to a fair trial because of, quote, improper influences by the county clerk on the jury. Let's bring in MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher and MS Now legal analyst and former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Catherine Christian. Fallon, thanks for keeping an eye on this breaking news. Break down what the Supreme Court ruled here.
Yeah, this is a really big deal. This is the highest state court in South Carolina, and they're ruling 5-0 unanimously that his convictions, his double murder convictions, must be overturned and that he's going to get a new trial. And they're saying that this all came down to the clerk who was responsible for overseeing the jury. And they're saying that she actually tampered with the jury. I want to read just briefly from this. They say that she egregiously attacked Murdaugh's credibility in his defense, thus triggering the presumption of prejudice. And this is because she would say things to the jury away from the judge, away from the attorneys of both sides, things like watch his body language, sort of implying his guilt there, and then later went on to write a tell-all book. And Murdaugh's attorneys have been arguing this entire time that she wanted a guilty verdict because that would sell more books. So they're saying she had this improper influence over the jury. They were not impartial, and he needs to have a new trial.
And Murdaugh is already serving time for separate crimes. What happens next here?
Yeah, that's the thing. So even if he does get a new trial here, he's likely to stay in prison for the rest of his life. So he faced a slew of financial charges, both state and federal charges. He pleaded guilty to those. He's currently serving a 27-year state sentence for stealing $12 million from his clients, and then a separate 40-year federal sentence for both bank fraud and money laundering. And those are concurrent sentences. So we're looking at 67 years. He's not a young guy. He's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison, even if he gets a new trial here.
Catherine, we always hear about double jeopardy, where you really can't be charged twice for the same crime. How does that factor in here? Does that apply?
No, because this is a reversal, and the prosecutors are entitled to retry him. So it wasn't a dismissal of the indictment, I believe. It was a reversal because of this improper conduct. Court officials are an extension of the judge. So when you have a court clerk engaging in this activity, it's an unfair trial. Prosecutors didn't commit misconduct. The defense were not ineffective. This was the court that interfered. And as the court said, justice is supposed to be blind and court officials are supposed to be mute. And that did not happen in this case.
The court clerk, to be specific. So, Catherine, the court ruled that the former county clerk denied Murdaugh his right to a fair trial by an impartial jury. Rebecca Hill, that court clerk, pleaded guilty last year to criminal charges for showing sealed exhibits to a photographer and then lying about it. She got probation. Could this open the clerk up to any new charges?
Yeah, well, if the charges that she pled to do not cover this reversal, they surely could. And let me just say, you can also expect the defense attorneys to argue that his pleas of guilty that occurred after he was convicted of this murder case should also be withdrawn. That may not be successful because he will argue that he only pled guilty because he was facing this murder conviction with life. So why not plead guilty and get concurrent time to just get rid of it? But this is the prosecutor's worst nightmare. They did nothing wrong. It was this court clerk that just reversed their conviction.
The clerk had allegedly made comments to jurors implying Murdaugh's guilt, saying just watch his body language during affidavits and his testimony. She also wrote a tell-all book about this trial and the aftermath. How are county clerks supposed to be behaving during a trial?
They're supposed to be mute, say nothing, be fair and impartial. They are an arm of the judge. So they say nothing. They treat both sides the same and never, ever, ever speak to jurors other than the administrative process of, you come back the next morning at 9:30, but definitely don't speak to them about the case.
Yeah, we don't usually hear about a court clerk. That's how under the radar they usually fly. Catherine, this case has captured national attention. I remember the extensive coverage when it was going on. Would it be difficult to find an impartial jury now that we're going to see a retrial?
No, because to be a fair and impartial juror, you're asked, despite all you know about this case, can you give this particular defendant a fair trial? It'll take time. That's what voir dire, jury selection, is about, sort of filtering out people from what they heard about the case to whether or not they can just follow the evidence that's in the courtroom. and not listen to a court clerk.
Clearly, this was a procedural issue, as you mentioned, nothing that the prosecution did wrong here. And it also didn't have to do with the evidence. Do you see the next trial having a different outcome?
Well, it's the same evidence, so it'll probably be the same outcome. It'll be the same defense, because the problem with changing your defense is, how do you explain there's a transcript from the other trial? How do you explain, the change of defense? So you better be certain that whoever the court clerk is and the judge will be on their best behavior if this case is retried.
Fallon Gallagher, Catherine Christian, quite the turn of events. Thank you both.